Welcome to Retail's Most Wanted, the podcast that examines the latest issues related to organized retail crime and how retailers and policymakers are fighting back against today's organized crime syndicates. I'm your host, Marty Carpenter. Coming up on today's show, the story of how a hot tip from Michigan ended up in disrupting an organized retail crime ring in Orem, Utah. That's coming up after this word from our sponsors. Retail's Most Wanted is brought to you in partnership with LVT, securing physical environments through intelligent automation. Learn more at lvt.com. That's lvt.com. Welcome back. We're joined today by Detective Roland Burke from the Orem Police Department in Utah. The department helped crack a nationwide retail theft operation that spanned from Michigan all the way to the Beehive State. Now, the organized retail crime crew had stolen over $100,000 in merchandise and intended to resell it in Mexico. Detective Burke, thanks so much for taking some time to be with us today.
I'm happy to be here. Thank you.
All right, let's start here. Tell us how this all went down.
For sure. Well, like a lot of my cases anyway, it's a mix of hard work and a lot of luck, and kind of like the chicken or the egg, which came first. I can't tell you that we would have done one without the other, but I'll kind of walk you through it. Monday morning, I was actually off that day. Early in the morning, I was checking my email prior to kicking off the week, like I typically do. And I had two emails that came in close proximity, and I can't remember which one was first, but one of them was a BOLO, or a Be on the Lookout, that came out of Michigan from an agency out there. And the BOLO basically articulated an organized retail theft. There were two vehicles listed in it, and they had pictures of, I believe, 6 to 8 suspects, and the loss in that was somewhere around $10,000. A couple things that stood out from that BOLO: they were Hispanic suspects, and they were using, everybody's familiar with booster bags, but these specifically were smaller backpacks that had some sort of metal lining in them that they were using to defeat the sensors. The reason, so it didn't come to me directly. It came to me from a fellow law enforcement officer in a different part of Utah. And the reason he sent it to me is the original detective had license plates off the vehicles and ran them in LPRs, or license plate readers. And they had recently hit in both Orem and Heber in Utah. So I got that email, found it very interesting, immediately forwarded it out to other members of my department. And then the second email I was referencing was actually a ORC theft here in Orem that had occurred over the weekend. And immediately looking at it, there were a couple suspects that were similar, and the booster bags they were using were identical. So when I pushed the email back out to my department, basically let them know they were probably linked, and then asked the original officer who took the report to look into it further. Surveillance footage, stuff like that, to match it up. So that's kind of what kicked everything off in the morning.
How often do you get one of these? I'd love to know, just sort of as a percentage, how often you get a BOLO alert, and how often that ends up in you actually finding the person you're on the lookout for.
I don't know what the percentage is there. Obviously we get BOLOs every day, and it's usually a combination of other agencies or retailers. And I think we have a better chance of catching suspects when they're tracking in near real time across the state, right? So everybody realizes these crews come in and they will work either a certain market, or they'll, in the case of Utah, it's very common to see people typically south to north, but it depends, but run the 15 and hit all the different locations. So when you have ongoing intel where people are, it's a little bit easier. This is absolutely the first time I've seen something that came from 3 states away, more than that, several states away 3 weeks prior, and then we're able to locate them here.
All right, so there's one element of it that's locating the individual you're looking for. The other element is tying it to this other organized retail crime incident that you were talking about earlier. How do you put those two together?
So for this particular case, honestly, the video surveillance was key, right? So you had the MO was specific to the backpacks, but the individuals were the same in both. And that's, again, that's the luck aspect, right? Just the fact that stuff goes the way it goes. You get the right video footage, and you capture faces. How often do we capture profiles and not frontal shots like that? So pushing that out immediately, kind of putting people on alert. And I'm not saying that anybody was actively going out and tracking them, but later that evening, we happened to have one of our undercover units who was in the area looking at something unrelated spotted one of the vehicles and then gave me a call. And that kind of kicked off a chain of events. We had some decisions to make immediately, and I asked them if they had the resources to try to follow that vehicle off. They did. Didn't go very far. It landed at a house. We ended up later finding out it was an Airbnb. So when the first vehicle landed, the second vehicle we were looking for was in the driveway. So we come to another decision point. At this point in time, we're probably 9 p.m. ish. So getting resources and people in place that late at night on short notice is sometimes challenging.
So it seems like the connection here was quite remarkable. You had an ORC incident in Orem, and you were able to connect that with information that came out of Michigan, as you put it, from 3 states away.
We wouldn't be here without that original BOLO. I mean, I can be as good as I want, but we definitely wouldn't be here without that point. We would have had our original incident, but we wouldn't at that point in time had anything to link it to and had a starting point because we didn't get vehicle information in hours, whereas Michigan did.
I want to ask you more about these backpacks that you mentioned. You said they had some kind of lining in them that helped them to avoid sensors. What kind of sensors are we talking about here?
So I don't know. Every retailer has different theft deterrent measures, right? So we've gone from the old school ink, I don't know what you call them, but the ink tags to varying levels of RFID and traditional electronic sensors. So it was interesting to me to note that, and we'll leave all the retailers out of this, but obviously these guys were very successful at a wide variety of places. And the sporting goods store we had here in Orem is the only one that I'm aware of that set off the sensors. So basically what happens, they had the backpacks loaded up, they left. There was some sort of alarm. And again, I don't know all the mechanics behind that, but there was some sort of alarms that alerted employees. And again, every retailer does things a little bit different, but these employees followed the suspects out into the parking lot. Suspect ended up dropping the backpack on the way out. And that's, again, kind of what helped tie in some of these other ones.
Tell me about the role the retailers play in this. They think they've been hit by an organized retail crime syndicate and they report that to you, or do you guys make that determination just as they report the incident?
So I think in this particular case, when we're trying to, let me back up a little bit and kind of just talk in generalities. For me, and I think for a lot of officers, there's a difference between going to one of these box retailers and somebody has stolen, I don't know, $50 to $150 worth of merchandise, and maybe they're, healthcare products, maybe they're clothes, maybe they're a variety of things. There's a difference between that. And in this particular incident, both the Michigan incident was, I forget what the dollar amount was, I think originally $8,000. I think later they upped it. In our sporting goods incident that kicked this off, I think the backpack was about $4,000 worth of clothes in it. So for me personally, and this goes back, and I'm back on a little bit, obviously we did a search warrant on that house that night and recovered a large amount of property. For me, kind of some of the things that stand out to differentiate between an individual and an organized crew are when we start seeing multiples of the same product, or we start seeing a theme between products, right? So they're not necessarily worried about sizes as they are taking a whole stack or a whole rack or a whole drawer of whatever that product is. So for me, the multiples and then the overall quantity and then the dollar value all indicate that you're dealing with something more than your average shoplifter.
What advice would you give to other law enforcement agencies facing similar cases?
It's a challenge, and I think regionally different retailers or different regions have there's some overlap, obviously, but they have different challenges or issues, and some of that's based on socioeconomics, some of that's based on law enforcement, politics, stuff like that. So for me personally, kind of coming up with this game, UTORCA, or the Utah Organized Retail Crime Association, has been key in some of those, some training and those relationships. So for people that may or may not be into the ORC game, really kind of getting with your local retailers, the ones that are getting hit the most, and identifying the trends. So we haven't discussed this overall case, but as we recovered property and started working backwards to different retailers, they were able to tell us, hey, yes, this matches an incident we had here, matches an incident we had here, and then you start kind of building it up. So knowing what your hotspots are, what your what your items are, what your trends are, really kind of gives you a starting point. And a lot of times retailers are very, very smart and very specific on their individual product, whereas we in law enforcement have to be experts at a wide variety of fields. And so we never get as in-depth and specific maybe as we could or as retailers do with their product.
From what you've seen, how can retailers and law enforcement work better together to prevent these types of operations? What would you like to see improve?
For this case specifically, I really have no complaints. I mean, their people showed up. It was great, and we had a lot of good success. I think one of the some of the challenges that we have across the board are just speaking a little bit different language and needing or wanting a little bit different outcome, right? So retailers obviously want to identify their product, want to get their product back. We as law enforcement want to facilitate that, but we need specific evidence to be able to charge people after the fact. So again, speaking for this specific case, one of my challenges after we had everybody detained or in custody was really identifying which people were involved at what locations and kind of building that out. And so for us, cameras are huge, and every retailer has different quality cameras. They're set up in different places. Some of these organized crews are very good at avoiding cameras or coming out and looking the other way. So cameras play huge. I think from a retailer standpoint across the board, whoever you're dealing with, whether it's a loss prevention person or somebody who's designated ORC, being upfront and realistic on what the expectations are and when you can get it. Do you have access to footage that you can download and send me? Do I need to write a subpoena or search warrant to get that? How long is it going to take? What's the retention period? It really comes down to that communication, and personality plays a large part in it. Some people are easier to work with than others, but it's at the end of the day, we all have to work together and educate each other on the other person's role.
Detective Roland Burke, thank you so much for your work fighting back against organized retail crime, and thank you so much for joining us today. Great job in this particular case, and best of luck with whatever may come down the road next.
I appreciate the time, and thank you much. Have a good one.
That's it for this episode of Retail's Most Wanted. Thanks as always to our presenting sponsor, LVT. Don't forget to hit that subscribe or follow button so you can catch each new episode. We drop a new one every 2 weeks. You can also find us and follow us on X, LinkedIn, and YouTube. Thanks for being with us, everyone, and as always, keep up the good fight.